I have been talking to people about tools a lot this week. I think as people are putting tools away, they're asking themselves, as I do I really need this? Got an awful lot of tools sitting out here, and which ones do I really use? We have to make room in our garage this time of year for the van to fit in, for whatever reason, probably to do with our particular location and the way the wind comes across. The van doors regularly freeze shut in the winter overnight if we leave it outside. They just freeze right shut, and there's sort of bringing out a hair dryer. There's no way to get them in. It's not that the lock freezes, the whole just the way the water runs on it, the whole top edge and side of the door freezes. So we have to make room in the garage before it gets really cold. And the things that are in the garage that take up all the room are birdseed packages and tools. So it's Steve's responsibility to try to skinny down all the birdseed stuff he's got out there, all the extra feeders and the sacks of seed that have not gone into the barrels yet, and what are they called? Suet cakes and just all kinds of stuff all over the place. And me, I've got a wheelbarrow, and it seems like every time I go out, I grab another bucket with a selection of tools in it. And then when I bring it back, I should put those tools back in my regular place. But instead, I end up with a little assortment of buckets. You know, this one I was using for pruning, and this one I was using to dig up pokeweeds and all those things. But mostly what's been happening this week is people have been finding things to do inside. Oh, well, at least in Michigan. My sister in Massachusetts got a lot done. She it's been dry there. They were supposed to start getting some rain today, which would be kind of the system that was over us the last couple of days. But she went out and mowed down her alternate lawn. She has a lawn of 4 different ground covers. It's just a small lawn, but it's 4 different ground covers rather than being lawn. And every few years it gets a little carried away with itself and hangs out over the edges, over the sidewalk. Makes it difficult to shovel snow, and people don't like to walk on the plants. So she mows it all off and lets it all grow back again. Um, and she also has been out cutting down her big grasses. Glad I don't have any big grasses. I have a neighbor with miscanthus grass in the front yard, and I've watched it year by year become a behemoth. It's probably close to 6 feet around. Probably in the center there's a dead spot, but you can't tell that from looking at it from the outside. And it takes a half an hour just to cut through the bottom of that, even if you're using a power tool. I'm not into doing those kinds of things anymore. I'd much rather do less and let the plants do more for themselves. Let's see, Carol's here. Hey, Dave. Well, hi, Priscilla. That's a very nice cart new cart that you have from the gang at the zoo. There's just, we know so many nice people through gardening. I know that they're nice. I think that there are more nice people out there than anything else. I think they're in the majority, and you're more likely to run into nice people than not. But with gardeners, I think the percentage goes up. It's just something really nice and thoughtful about gardeners. Here they are volunteering their time and coming to the zoo to take care of a garden, and they give to the organizer of the group, Priscilla and her husband Paul. They give them a new garden cart, one of those big wheeled wagon type carts. It's just very handy to have. I like those better than they're sturdy and steady. So people who worry about wheelbarrowing and the wheelbarrow tipping over or yanking them to the side can use a wagon. Those 2-wheeled wheelbarrows drive me crazy. They are more stable because they got the wider 2 wheels in the front. So they've got 3 points to set down, 4 points to set down. But they're very difficult for me to navigate with, to make turns, to negotiate narrow areas. I'm pretty good with a wheelbarrow going between bushes or next to tools or between potted plants and not hitting the plants. But I can't control those 2-wheel wheelbarrows, so I kind of stay away from those. We did think once, I don't see Martha here, but Martha Ferguson and I did talk extensively one year about having a gardeners Olympics, that we really should have something that could be hosted at various nurseries, and maybe the qualifying run for precision wheelbarrowing could be at one nursery, and the quarterfinals could be at another one. And we had, let's see, we had precision wheelbarrowing, hose wrestling. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that most of us have out in the garden. Um, Sod toss, when you're taking sod out and throwing it toward a wheelbarrow. Um, Watering relay, speed weeding, and there was another one. I never could get people interested in being sponsors though, but it was nice to talk about it. Let's see, time to go. Almost time to go. If anybody has come in, has any questions that they want to pose or want to share anything that you've been doing this week, you can just turn on your microphone and go ahead and talk. It would be nice if you raised your hand first, and so that it's not, I can tell you who's at the top of my list, and that'll tell you that it's your turn to talk. Or you can put something in the chat. Steve is not here tonight. He was pining away to go to the hockey game, our grandson's hockey game. And I said, no, there's not that much going on this week. I can try to handle the free for all. It's great big pointers, difficult to navigate with. And it's funny because it's I find the big pointer where you can change the size of your pointer and the color of your pointer, whatever. It's in the settings for accessibility on our computer. So it would be where you put larger font if you don't see well. There's vibration stuff for people like me with the hands that shake. Not that I've found that it does much good, but this big pointer, big pointer is meant to make it simpler to see where you're going and get it around. But I find it hard to figure out where the point on the pointer is because it's covering so much space. You have to keep moving it around to find the right place where or it's going to make whatever click it is that you want to happen. Hey, Chris just came in. Here comes people. Probably don't have to have a clock. I can just look for when people start showing up because everybody knows their time. It's dark and it's cold and it's wet. So let's go talk about gardening. Just spoke to someone today. My dental hygienist was in South Carolina this year. We talked a little about South Carolina, but she was there to help the turtle rescue organization that was there. So she and her family counted turtle eggs and estimated viability of each clutch and protected clutches and whatever. Pretty cool. Dave says that the last plant to retain full bloom at the Udolph Garden was monkshood. Yes, the monkshood that I know as the late one is aconitum monkshood carmichaeli. It's also called azure monkshood, I think. I call it fall monkshood, and I do like it, and I do have experience with it. Like the delphiniums, it's closely related. It really likes cool, moist conditions. Not bad drainage, but cool and moist. Think Scottish Highlands, where when it's 70 degrees, people start going, oh my gosh, it's so hot. That's what they like the most. And when it's humid and hot in the summertime growing season, like it is here, the delphiniums and also the aconiums and a couple of their other relatives develop several fungal and bacterial problems that infect the crown. They start on the leaves usually, and then they move to the stems. And if you're not really good about cutting out every bad piece that you see, they end up descending into the roots, and it becomes a regular thing each year. It almost never kills the plant. It just makes it look terrible. It still blooms. And if you've got a place where the air moves freely and you think you can keep it cool enough, especially if you can get that window, that 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock window, get it into high shade. They're beautiful to have. They're also very toxic, monkshoods. Um, they are one of the plants that the um, Roman legions and probably many other armies before them would use to throw down into wells to poison wells when they were doing their scorched earth treatment of on a campaign. And it is something that if you were to cut it or divide it or get any of the um, cell contents on your fingers and then ate a sandwich, you could end up in the hospital. So you don't want to have it around where people might just get a little too carried away with being close to their plants. Diana, it's nice to see you here. Okay. Oh, so now I run over time. All right, we're just asking that everybody mute your microphone, keep your camera turned off. This is back up. It's a good thing I can edit these. Welcome to Free for All Friday, where everybody's welcome. And we're celebrating growing and cultivating problem solving. This is our 26th Friday, Free for All Friday. It's November 22nd. We've had our first snow here at my house. I'm waiting for Indian summer. We can talk about that later. We write about this on gardenatc.org. I'm Janet McConvich, and Stephen Nicola is absent tonight. You might hear some dog barking tonight because there's nobody to watch the dogs either. We ask that you keep your microphone and your camera off. And all you need to do is go into chat and type your questions in, or raise your hand control is in the chat. You can open up and it'll appear chat to everybody, chat to meeting group, or everyone, depending on what your browser says. Don't chat to just me because I'm only watching one chat screen and I can't really watch the multiple ones. And if you want to raise your hand so you can talk, I would love it if you talk. Otherwise, it's going to be me talking the whole hour here. I'll be the only voice that you hear. But if you go into reactions, you'll find a raise your hand control. If it's not there, open your participants window and you raise your hand control over there. Once you raise your hand, you'll pop to the top of my list, my alphabetical list. I'll see that somebody has their hand raised and I can say, go ahead and open your microphone and talk. That's a great way to do it. So welcome. Me on a November day when it was nicer out, and Steve on a nice July day. Those of you whose names I see here know our website already. Thank you for using it. Thank you for telling people about it. It's a place where we put the things that we've written over the years. And we're trying to accumulate more things in there so that we can write and move on to new stuff, which has been a big thing this week. New stuff this week. And the Free for All Fridays were our idea earlier this year when we thought, we just like talking to people, and we are blown away by how many good tips people give each other, gardeners give each other when they get together. When they get together in our volunteer group at the Waterford Library, or Priscilla and Paul's group at the zoo, or a Master Gardener meeting, if they actually have gardening things to do, gardening things to look at, gardening things to talk about, then things come out that people wouldn't think of telling each other otherwise. They say, oh, that happened to me too, or I've seen that. So we decided that this would be the better way to do it, because our forum on the website, our forum has been hacked too many times for us to open it back up. We let people post in there, and and we had a great time. There's thousands of posts in there, but most of these computer bots can get past that stuff, and they would post entries that had links in them that you would click on and get trapped into various deals and stuff. It just not my idea of fun. So Free for All Fridays takes their place. Are there any questions? I don't see them. I don't see anything new in the chat. Open your chat and type in anything as you think about it, because what happens to me when I'm listening to somebody explain about some new process or some plants or whatever is I'll think of it and it'll be gone in a second as I listen to the next thing. So make yourself some quick notes in the chat and you can send those when we get to a questions place. Look at those oak leaves. They exquisite. Well, what we've been doing this week is talking to various people, and you'll hear about it in earthworms and scent, looking things up that just keep dragging us away. But we're going to start with pruning, because trees are bare. It's that time of year. It's a very old picture of a very beautiful ash. Isn't that a gorgeous tree? It's still there. It's being treated for emerald ash borer every year to make sure that it can survive. And it's already been 20 years since the big wave came through. And like the elm blight that killed so many billions of elms throughout the country, it's going to be around for a long time. So keeping a tree like this means keeping it for a long time. But this is the time of year when you can see the structure within the tree. So it's time to think this time of year about what's not a keeper in your woody plants. And that's what was going on with Diane. We sent this just today, and I said, oh, good, something real to put in. This is a witch hazel she planted by her back gate. It's an Arnold Promise witch hazel. Um, I have to tell you that it's sometimes called Arnold's possessive promise, and its true given name by the Arnold Arboretum is Arnold Promise. But Arnold Promise is a usually it'll get to be 12 feet tall, and consider it a big shrub or a small tree. And Diane is considering what she wants to do with this one. She said, I'm not sure. I've pruned it a little bit, but I think I like it to be a tree, and I don't think it wants to be a tree. What do you think we should do with it? So she sent me several pictures and asked whether it was okay, really okay to send full-size pictures. Yes, even if they're 5-6 megabytes, that's nothing compared to the stuff that we have stored away from Steve's big, huge file photographs. But the more that we can have in the resolution size, the bigger the size, the more ability we have to zoom in and look at things closely that might interest us. So this Arnold Promise, what are we going to do with it? I started out by looking and looking at the various pictures you'll see in a minute and deciding that these two come out. This bigger stem on the side and this smaller one coming up here, that those need to go, that they are actually suckers. The smaller ones, and there's actually 3 of them all grown together. You can see them there, and I put red X's on them so that you can tell where they are. They are not of use to the plant. They're just growing through the same area that the rest of the plant is in, and they will just be competing for light and space there and cluttering up the view. Plus, they're probably coming from below the graft. Almost all the woody plants that we buy now, not all of them, but those that have a name like Arnold Promise, not just witch hazel, but Arnold Promise witch hazel, almost all of those are made by grafting a bit of the particular plant they're looking for onto a different rootstock. And something that grows from below the graft is going to be like the rootstock, not like the plant that you wanted. And Arnold Promise is famous for suckering. You just got to keep on top of it all the time because it wants to sucker. And the suckers have a smaller, paler flower than Arnold Promise, and in more loose clusters. So it's not as attractive. So I said, let's take those off. And on the other side, so there's where the small suckers you just saw there on that side. On this side, this big guy who looks like he really belongs is probably almost certainly a sucker also. One of the things you look at is see the difference in the color of wood, the grayer bark and the browner bark. You see the same thing behind there. On a young stem, you might think, well, it's just because it's young. But as it gets older, these should look the same because bark is just as distinctive as flowers and leaves in a woody plant. So if those two were gone, then there would be a nice structure here of 3 main trunks, each of them already taking 3 main branches, but solo branch, you could call them 3 trunks. Since Steve and I like witch hazels that are broad, low witch hazels, like not 15 feet, but 10 or 12 feet, and we like them to be broad, we generally have them branch low or be multi-trunked. And I would suggest that you do that because it is, if you do grow them as a one trunk tree, I've seen it done at botanical gardens. It's also obvious from the pruning scars left on the plant that it just keeps trying to be a bush. So rather than fight it, go with a 3 trunk plant. And looking at the bottom and thinking about that brown on the suckers, Do you see the change in color of the bark right here? I'm pretty sure that this is the graft union. This is where the piece that was the top was inserted into the piece that was the bottom, and the cambiums grew together. And so anything coming from there or below there is going to be not Arnold Promise. I also noticed that there appears to still be girdling roots, but maybe this is just that turtleneck-like wrinkled appearance of right above the flare. But I would check also to make sure that those aren't roots that are girdling and going to stop that trunk from growing and undo all your efforts to make it any kind of a pretty plant. So if those two are gone, and then you've got those three main branches left, you can start limbing them up over the years, taking off the lower side branches so that you've got 6 foot of clearance underneath. Gives you plenty of room to grow things. It lets you walk past it on the path that I know is right here where the photographer is standing in this picture. And it gives you those 3 trunks. That's what I would do with that, Diane. And now is a good time to see that. Is it a good time to prune it? If the leaves have fallen off of it, yeah, it's a good time to prune it. It's probably a better time to prune it in the early spring, late winter, March. Because right now, although the leaves have fallen off, the carbohydrates that those leaves produced are still being passed down through the wood and being assimilated in the trunk and the roots. And you want it to have all the energy that it can have. I know Diane was concerned about how much she took off at one time. And she said, if it's a major thing, and if I've got to take off something big like that, I probably have to do it over 2 years. And I disagree. If you count, so there's the big trunk that I was suggesting get taken out as a big sucker. If you count the number of buds, that's what counts, not how big and tall it is, but how many leaf buds does it have set for next year? And you compare that to what will be left on the plant. If there's twice as much left on the plant as what you take off, then you've only taken 1/3 of the plant's energy source off. And you're getting yourself ahead of a big step ahead all at once. So if you want to be cautious, you could take off the small suckers first and maybe shorten the big one to take out anything that's competing up at the top with the rest of it. But I would take out both of those to start with, both this one and the little ones on the far side. Anybody else doing any kind of pruning like that? Should this is a beautiful beech tree, and I know that's in a botanical garden. I think it's in the Dawes Arboretum. I think I see their log cabin behind it. And trees that have problems with diseases of the wood. Oak right now is a big one. There's sudden oak death and oak wilt are rampant throughout the Midwest, and they are carried by beetles from tree to tree. And those beetles flock very quickly to the smell of sawed wood. They come to drink the sap, and they bring with them the fungus that came from the last tree that they worked on. So we're advised to not prune oaks except during the actual winter, after the end of the growing season. And we haven't had a killing frost here. We've had snow, but we haven't had a killing frost, one that'll knock down all the tall stems that are left up there. When oak wilt and first got into Michigan, we were told only from December to March, and only in the cold part of March. Then in Minnesota and Wisconsin, I'm pretty sure it was Minnesota and Wisconsin, the Forestry Service and the extension did some studies and found that there wasn't much transmission going on after July. So they said you can prune in the last half of the summer. I prefer to stick with the safer way of doing it, which is to prune in the truly winter cold part of the season. If you do have to prune during maybe a branch got dangerous and cracked or fell off, if you have to prune during the beetle flying time, then the best thing you can do is paint the cut immediately. Like make the cut and pull out of your pocket your Elmer's glue and put glue, a solid coat of glue over it. What it does is it seals in the scent. The paints that we used to use all the time, the tar paints and the lime wash paints, those are most of those are not effective or can actually be counterproductive. They can kill cells that are the cells the plant needs to remake new cambium and cover over wounds. Deb wants to know about pruning lilac shrubs. Well, my granddaughter in our magic oak tree down the street, pruning lilacs, if you want to go in and just do a lot of pruning and haven't done a lot of pruning before, then you might want to wait until after they bloom because you're going to be cutting off a lot of wood that might have flowers on it right now. And that's if the flower is really important to you. If flowers are not all that important, you're just trying to shape them up or rejuvenate them. Almost any time is fine. I cut our last big lilac down that we inherited here last year in the fall. I've cut my son's in the winter during the February thaws, and all I'm doing with those, one I was cutting all the way down over 2 years' time in order to rejuvenate it because it was all old, decrepit wood. And at my son's, I was bringing it down in size so that the flowers would be more in the window and they could smell them more. So go at it whenever you want to go at it. But if you're trying to preserve as much flower as possible, wait till right after it flowers and go ahead and do that then. Dahlia storage. I have to roll with my extremely huge pointer, I have to roll the chat window up and it's not wanting to roll. But I saw a question about how to store dahlia tubers. So many ways to store them. How would you suggest to do it? We talked about this last week in the last Free4All Friday, that you're looking for 50-50 to store dahlia tubers. You're looking for 50 degrees and 50% humidity. And if you've got 40 degrees, then you can have a little more humidity. If you've got 60 degrees, you have to have less humidity. You're looking for something that adds up to 100 and stays in the cool side. We always put our dahlias, and we haven't done any dahlias this year, we always put our dahlias either into a box of sand, or if they were grown in a pot, we just stored pot and all in our back room that didn't have a furnace duct in it, so it stayed cool if we just kept the door closed. And it had a tile floor, which helped too. Now we can keep them in our garage against the wall that's the house. The garage is not heated, but the wall against the house, things that are there don't freeze. Out in the garage themselves, a bucket of water would freeze, but against the house, they don't freeze. And you check them during the winter once in a while. You're looking for soft ones. If they're soft, get them out of there because they can spoil. And when they spoil, the fungal spores that are spoiling them can get into others. We don't cut them up first. We just keep them whole because the more you cut, the more you have to think about having open tissue that could get infected. We went to, you might want to go there yourself, Karen. If you have any downstate business to do, stop in Midland at Dahlia Hill. It's just dahlias. I think I want to say there's 10,000. There may be more than that dahlias of 300 some kinds, and that's all they grow there. And the process of bringing those dahlia tubers in is happening right now. I'll try and see if I can get that on for our next webinar, because we went up to talk to her and got a lot of information about doing this then. And they do cut theirs up first and label them. They write right on the tuber with a marker what tuber it is. And then they dust the cuts with a fungicide and keep them in a root cellar, a 50 degree, 50% humidity root cellar in boxes over the winter time. They don't use any packing around them because they're in a cold room. But is that the best way? I don't know if that's the best way. You're right. I've seen a lot of people do that. And Diane is wondering about protecting the buds on her magnolia from the deer. Diane, have they been eating your magnolia? Because we've had bucks beat up magnolia, but for the most part, magnolias have been pretty much off limits to deer. Like they don't like, there's something about them. Are they eating them already? Because if they are, then you've got some pretty hungry deer. And the only thing I could think to do would be to put a fence around it or to use a repellent spray. We use a repellent spray on something till it's new, until we get it up big enough. And we protect the trunk from bucks until it gets big enough because they're out there. There's no getting away from the fact that the deer are there, and we're not about to go getting rid of the deer. Karen says she's going to put hers in a heated garage. Well, yeah, that's a perfect place to put them. You should be able to just put them. Karen says she's going to put her dahlia tubers in a heated garage, 50, 55 degrees. That's perfect. Put them in a box if you think that it might be a little dry out there, because it can get pretty dry in the wintertime. Sometimes the air can get really dry. Then you might want to put crumpled up newspaper around them. Or if you don't mind heavy boxes to move around, we would just pour sand into them. I don't know why we always had sand, but we always had sand at the end of the year. Um, okay. And Marilyn does have a pruning question. She's talking about her seven sun shrub, it's called, but it's actually kind of a small tree. And she says she's been looking at it now, so maybe she's going to put yarn or ribbon around branches to say these are the ones I'm thinking about pruning off in the spring. She'd like to reach up as high as she can, lower it overall. Lowering it overall. Do you want to bring the height down? Because if you want to bring the height down, then go ahead and have at it. Pick places where there looks like there could be a side branch that could become a new crotch, and go ahead and lower it. They're very amenable to pruning. The seven sun, they're very fast to grow back. Okay, let's go back on here. Always next spring. There's always next spring. That's what makes it wonderful to be a gardener. There's always next year. Something happens this year, there's always next year. And that's good for what's ailing me, and maybe for you too, because my list is far outlasting the fall. I have so many things to do, from closing the pond. I still have the water drip running for the birds, and I need to switch that now and pull the pump out, clean up the leaves, and put out Steve's heated bird bath. And I haven't done that yet. But although this has happened this week, this was yesterday. This was yesterday or the day before. I've forgotten which day we got the snow. Yesterday. And it did all melt by 4, and then some more came down and it melted. But it's pretty. And I know there's still Indian summer coming. I know that other people say, no, you're crazy. But my mother told me so many times when I was a kid. I don't know why this subject came up, but I was a pretty attention deficit kid, so I probably kept asking the same thing over and over again. But I was told that it's not truly Indian summer unless it comes after Armistice Day, which is now Veterans Day, November 11th. And so since I heard it so much as a kid and all my adult life gardening, I've watched for it. And there's been only 2 or maybe 3 times in 50 years that I haven't seen an Indian summer after November 11th. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it was in early December. Scott Bates and I running around in short sleeve shirts and light jackets in December, going through the nursery. And I mean, that does happen. And I think it's still coming. So I have to prioritize what's left on my list to make sure that I do the things that I can't do when it's really cold out. And it's nice to get a preview of what kind of winter interest you have up. Our Amsonia is fading out, fading to yellow, but we'll leave it there, and it maintains its position. It's a faded yellow, but it stands out in the wintertime. I have been meaning to go and take the stems of the swamp milkweed out of here, because I think it would be better to have just the penstemon and the flow into the yarrow and up into the butterfly bushes and the pines in here without so much height. It's good to be able to look at those kinds of things, and know that it's not permanent yet. Let's see what questions we got. I see a new message about dahlia tubers that Karen cut out the spoiled parts already. There are pinpoint, I guess that's the small nicks and things that can happen on plants that, oh, we just jumped a long way ahead. There we go. There are small nicks and cuts, even bruises that can happen that you don't see right away. And those are the things that can, as the winter goes by, those are what can get infected. So it's good to clean them up ahead of time, but every place that you clean them up, you leave a cut. Okay, let's go with summered out plants, and we'll have to have to worry about that a little bit later. Things you put out for the summer, and now you brought them back in, and they're lush and they're beautiful. Sonia was very worried about this. This is our friend Sonia who gave us the wonderful voodoo lily this year. She brought in her hibiscus. She said, "Oh, look," she said, "I think I've killed them. I sprayed them with soapy water, and did I kill them?" No, no. If you sprayed the whole plant with soapy water, which is one way to try to cut down the number of pest insects that it might bring in with it, it's no way to eliminate them. Don't even worry about that, you guys. Don't even try to do it. I'll get into that a little bit later. But if you sprayed the whole plant, the fact that only some of the leaves are turning yellow should be telling you that there's something going on. And if you look, you'll see it's the older leaves. A plant that keeps its young leaves and gives up its older leaves is telling you that it's not got enough light or not got enough nutrient. So if this plant was growing underneath grow lights in the house, I would say, I think you probably need to give it a bit of fertilizer. It's sacrificing its old leaves to keep the young ones. But sitting in a room like that, inside in the low light in the house, relatively low light as compared to outside, low light in the house, what it's doing is it's thinning itself out because it can't support that many leaves. So you could help it along and just clip the leaves off so that you don't have to keep picking them up off the floor. But cleaning them up is something that people like to do. I used to repot my plants in the fall, which is not the ideal time to repot, but more on that next webinar. It's not the ideal time to repot, but I would repot thinking that that would cut out bringing in sow bugs in the drain holes or slugs hiding out somewhere. But found that that really doesn't make a difference. Most of the pests that are on the plant are on the plant. They're either there and moving around so that you can't find them, or they're too small for you to find, or they're eggs and resting bodies. And even if you get the ones that are moving, you don't get all the next generation. And most plants that are left outside for the summertime in full light like that are healthier when you bring them in than they ever have been the rest of the year. So the healthier the plant is, the more that it can fight off its own pests. What happens with these plants is the little bit that's left on them, maybe it would be mealybugs on a hibiscus. By January, when the days are really short and the light is even lower, and plants can tell it's lower, you might think because you keep the light on inside, it makes a difference, but there is a difference in the day length when the plants sense it. As they get into a lower light and shorter days, they get weaker and the pests start getting an upper hand. So usually about New Year's week, we start getting emails from people saying, "Oh my gosh, I've suddenly got scale all over the place, or mealybugs all over the place, or whitefly all over the place." If you rinse them off really well when you bring them in, that knocks off some of the things. And then plants that big, I would put in the shower and shower them afterwards. Gretchen has a indoor plant problem here with her begonia. She's wondering if that might be earwig damage. Oh, good. I was able to roll my chat up. Jean is asking about your pruning, and Jean, nope, it's coming up. I put it in now because I think I got a text from you and knew you were not there. Sand at the beach for free. Karen's planting her dahlias in there. Okay. 50 degrees does not count as Indian summer. Nope, Barb, it's got to be those 60 to 70 degree days. Okay, let's go on with this, and I'll get Marilyn to your question and Barb back to Indian summer shortly. This is Gretchen's begonia, indoor begonia, and she's wondering if that could be earwig damage. It certainly could be earwig damage. They do chew kind of ragged holes on the edge or in the plant itself. For the most part, earwigs don't cross big dry areas. So those earwigs may be right in the underside of the pot, and you could actually watch for them and clear them out. It'd have to be pretty moist to have a next generation of earwigs happen in your house. I mean, really moist soil for them to give you another generation. So you probably just have some that are finding their way to your plants, if that is earwigs. Now, one of the things that you can do when you're wondering about plants, and I'm looking to see if did somebody come in and cut that up? No, somebody ate that. I'm kind of surprised that they're eating begonia, But then if their choice is a begonia or a cactus, I guess that's the answer. But generally, plants with a fuzz on the leaves, so you can see the fuzz on the edge of the begonia leaf. Plants with fuzz on the leaf tend to be not desirable to a lot of insects because it's trying to eat something that's too wide. Imagine trying to eat a sandwich with a brush sticking out of it. Your mouth doesn't handle that very well. But if you've got a problem with plants, now you can do so many things that have to do with extension services, posting all their, see, we got Arizona EDU, we've got Utah Extension. Some of these down here are also extensions. But if you go to images in your browser, and I'm generally using Google, I'm pretty lazy that way. I just put in earwig damage on leaves to get an idea of what they're showing as, and then this is what I'm used to seeing, these kind of things between the veins and on the edges. But you need to be out there out at night to see if that's what it is. Sonia, my daughter, had black vine weevil find its way into the house, and that happens sometimes in the late part of the year when the black vine weevils are looking for places to lay eggs. They sometimes get into crevices in the house where it's warmer and end up on the inside. And then you have them walking around inside. Well, somehow she got a black vine weevil and had the distinctive edge notching from a black vine weevil. And it took a while to find it, but finally she did find it. She said, there's one in here someplace, but it was a distinctive look. I brought in a streptocarpella that we bought this plant for our granddaughter at a dance, after a dance recital. Everybody had bundles of flowers they were giving the kids, and we thought we'd give her a plant. And she kept it in her room over the winter. And then I took it from her. She said it's not flowering anymore and it's looking a little sad. I took it for her and I put it outside for the summer. And the poor thing got eaten. I'm not sure who ate it, but it was right outside the bathroom window. So every morning I would look at it. And one morning I thought it had bigger leaves than that. And then the next day I said, no, I'm certain it had more leaves than that. Somebody was just going by and eating a leaf a day. It's now grown all the way back, but it's quite chlorotic. And when I brought it in, I gave it some fertilizer because I said, well, you've been ignored all year. And the new leaves are coming in darker, but still not quite right. And it took me a little while to look and say, oh, no. Okay, can you see the webbing? That's the webbing from spider mites. They're relatives of spiders, but they're not spiders. And they're sucking on the leaves and causing the plant to give to the mites most of the energy the plant should be using to be doing its own thing. Now, I don't have any other house plants. We've talked about this before, that we don't have any windows that have good light. This one is sitting underneath a grow light. We don't have any windows that have good light. And many years ago, I got kind of tired of bringing plants in and out. So I said, I'm going to just grow my stuff outside. But I do have this one inside. If I had other plants in the house, I would make sure that this was nowhere near them, at least a couple 3 feet away from everything else. And I would make sure that I washed my hands before I touched another plant after I touched this one. What am I going to do about it? So I confirmed that it was mites. You can't see them in this picture, but they generally like to hide on the underside of the leaf, but they're all over. I had to have a magnifier to see them. They're all over, little light colored dots moving slowly back and forth and sucking on the leaves. I will be taking the whole plant. Do I have a picture of the whole plant? Go back. I will be taking the whole plant out of the pot. I should just throw it away. It's just a streptocarpella. I can get another one for a couple of bucks. But we like to play around with these things. I'm going to take the whole plant out of the pot, cut off the worst leaves. These have been there for quite a while. And then I'm going to immerse the entire plant underwater with a little bit of soap in it, a teaspoon of dish soap for every gallon of water. And I'm going to put it underneath the water and let it sit for the count of 20. Then I'll bring it out and let it drip off. Then I'll rinse it off and I'll put it into a new pot. And then if I keep spraying it with a soapy water and then rinsing it off after I've got it in the new pot, especially the underside of the leaves, I probably can keep ahead of the mites long enough to bring that back to her as we get into the winter time. Plants and their problems. I'm actually very surprised that this one came in with mites because where we put it outside, it's right at the edge of the pond. It was constantly being splashed by the pond, and mites generally don't like wet leaves, but they live where they live. Let's see. Okay, Marilyn asks where we put our heated bird bath. She doesn't want to trip over it or shovel over it over a cord. Can be out on the ground about 8 to 10 feet from the house and take jugs or buckets out to refill. We put ours. Now we're in a bi-level, so our lower level windows are at ground level or just above ground level. Our pond is right outside the bathroom window. It's about 4 feet outside the bathroom window. And the birds are used to coming there. We put the heated bird bath on a flat rock between the bathroom window and the pond and put water in it. And we keep a watering bucket, a spouted watering bucket like you use for houseplants in the bathroom. And we open the bathroom window, reach out and pour water into the bird bath. That's easier than walking all the way outside around and putting water into it. And because it is heated and it's shallow so that you don't drown any birds, you do have to put water into it every day. It's nice to have it out there, though. The birds use it, and other things use it too. We've put our trail cam out there and caught everything from possum, raccoon, and squirrel in it to birds in it. Okay, and Marilyn's also just bought some plant grow lights from Lee Valley Tools, $21 each. And she's got a light from them that she can cover 2 or 3 different herbs. Kept keeping rosemary successfully. Good for you. And she's curious to see if the rosemary will survive the winter. We've seen rosemary survive the winter in the Detroit area in a protected place. Marilyn, were you in our School of Gardening when we designed the garden for the Junior League house? That was the old Fisher Mansion in Palmer Woods. Because if you were, then you know that it was an interior courtyard. It was an outside courtyard, but it was on 3 sides. The building wrapped around it. And we've had rosemary make it through the winter there. But every place else, it pretty much gets killed back. And I got very attached to our rosemary. I used to carry that. It was one of the last plants that we kept and carried in and out. And I think I finally let it loose at the zoo. It made it through one winter at the zoo. There's so many cool things going on out there right now. Pruning in late winter is a good idea, but if you can prune pretty stuff like this, these all came from a Dennis Grove's conifer collection. Just all the different kinds of things that he's growing out there and that you can use in wreaths and decorations in the wintertime. Aren't they beautiful? Aren't they gorgeous? This is from one of the articles that we put onto our website, just talking about the kinds of things you can cut now and why it's okay to cut them, even if you're not pruning for shape, you're pruning just to gather some greens. If you're not affecting the protection of the plant, if by taking off this branch, you are not opening up a big hole into a part of the plant that was being protected by this stuff, then you're not going to hurt the plant. So you can take off branches off of spruces and junipers and pines. And I mean, it's nice to go out to a nursery or to a farmer's market and buy a fresh wreath, but you can have a really fresh wreath that will last all winter long if you make it right now and smell great because you got to pick everything out pick everything personally that you wanted to put in it. Okay, no questions in chat. Those of you who just joined us, Sue, are you here? Let me see, I have to get down to the S's in my list. Not such a hard secret. Why didn't I figure that out before? No, I don't see our Sue praying here. Okay, got a question this week from Teresa about whether the oily sand trick works to keep tools sharp. You may have heard of this, of keeping a large bucket of sand that you put oil into. And when you come in from working in the garden, you slide your tools in and out of that oily sand to help clean the soil off of them and to put a skim of oil on them to help preserve the wood, the metal. I'm interested in anybody's actually tried this because we have never tried it, in large part because when we come in with a spade that's got dirt on it, like this one does here, if I put that into a bucket of sand, oily sand, I'm going to have dirt in there. And over time, there'll be more dirt built up in there. And now I'm going to have a bucket of oily sand that I've got to figure out what to do with. And I'm not going to put it in my garden because it's oily. And that's not good at all for soil structure or for roots growing in it. So we never did that. But I do know that my very first spade as an adult, my very first rectangular blade spade, which I no longer use because it finally wore through paper thin and got a crack in it. But the people who worked for us at the time put a plaque on it for me, and I've still got it hanging in the garage because everybody wanted to use that spade. It was very sharp. And I think it was that way because for 10 years before I was gardening professionally, that was what I used obsessively at home. I would be out gardening for 8 hours each day or 10 each weekend day. And I'd be out right after work working. And our soil was very sandy. And that spade was sharpening itself on the sand all the time. I think it was just never running into anything that was a problem. So the sand might be useful as well, but I've not tried it. And I don't see anybody saying that they've tried it. So I'll just tell Teresa we got to find some real person because it's one of those ideas that sounds good. Certainly not going to work for things like pruners. Those you can take a look at our tool care webinar, which I think is in the free list, and we can show you step by step how to do pruners because they're one of the worst treated tools that we've got. We use it all the time, and I make a point when we have gardeners come to one of our garden by workshops where we ask people if they want to come, they can come learn. I asked this, let's see your pruners first. We always end up sharpening pruners first because everybody's pruners are in such terrible shape. So wouldn't work for those, but work for everything else. Yeah, I loved my old spade too, Karen. Those palms are amazing plants. In this garden down in South Carolina, when I was working, I came across something I haven't seen before as I was digging. You know how sometimes when you dig, you move worms and things. Well, some of us move worms and things out of the way. Go, oh, I don't want to hurt you. A little bitty crab. Said, boy, we must be near the ocean. Little bitty crabs running around in here. It is a good time of year now. This first real cold period where you're tired of going out. It's a good time to congratulate yourself on what you've done this year. And I want to congratulate Jean on what she's done over a few years now. She says, I started with these arborvitaes. I bought them. They were each cute little things. They were no bigger than a bowling ball or a bushel basket. And I never thought they were going to get this big, but none of us ever do. And that's actually a dwarf. I mean, it's an arborvitae. It's a Eastern arborvitae, and Eastern arborvitae is easily 80 feet tall when it gets full grown. This is a dwarf form, and it's not lying. But she was taking foliage off in order to be able to grow her garden of hostas and other plants underneath it, and began limbing them up. You can see the cuts that are made here. And then got more serious about it, taking more of the main branches off and making it more tree-like. So that the edges now got more sun and more ability to support other plant growth in that garden. And it means taking a lot of stuff out. A lot of stuff out. I think those are the things we need to look at and are good reasons to be taking pictures of what you're doing, to remind yourself that if maybe you sat around yesterday because it was cold and it's wet and you couldn't get the ambition to go out, but you've been out more than other people have been out. You've been outside seeing and doing what other people wouldn't even think of seeing and doing. Thank you, Marilyn. She says that Stephen and I inspired her to clean tools years ago. She has a cleaning party with a friend or two in January or February. Oh, I should invite you too to the second Wednesday in January at the Waterford Library. We'll be doing our annual tool cleaning and sharpening. The library lets us bring all of our tools into the community room. We cover the tables with plastic and newspapers. We show people how to sharpen. We sit and sharpen and talk. And everybody is welcome. Just bring the tools that you want to work on. That's the second Wednesday in January. We'll try to send you a reminder at the Waterford Township Library at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's fun to do. And it tells me I have 2 new messages, so we'll keep on going down here. figured out how to get this pointer. Jean says that she had a Sawzall she was using. Power tools are really wonderful when you're doing big work like that. Um, I've had people tell me that they wanted to use a Sawzall for things like this. And for big cuts like that, and then taking the stub off down to the collar, a Sawzall will usually work. But when you're doing fine stuff, Japanese maples with close crotches and you're trying to do proper pruning, Sawzall doesn't do it, and power tools are hard to do. I've been often telling people that I'd like a Dremel tool like the dentist has for just taking a little bit off the edge of a tooth. I'd like to have one of those to just worry away the little bits on the tight places in woody plants. This is in Scotland, and this is a 3,000-year-old yew, verified 3,000 years old. People tell me all the time, oh, I'm going to take out the yews in my front yard. They're really old. They're 50 years old. That's a baby yew. And it's a lot bigger than you might think from looking at it from here. Back to the magnolia buds. Let's see, who asked about the magnolia? Oh, it was Diane. I think it was Diane Anderson. I am interested whether or not the deer have been eating the magnolia, because if they have, I need to change it on my list from the things that they don't mess with. So for the most part, they haven't eaten any magnolia. And well, anyway, Bobbin Legs Blue. Karen is wondering if anybody else notices as they drive to stores or through drive-throughs, whether they notice how badly things need pruning or need tending. I think, do you want to raise your hand, or I wish the reaction button might have something that we could do this kind of raise your hand thing. But if you felt that same way, because I bet most gardeners do look and go, for crying out loud, who have they got taking care of this place? Or why did they plant that stuff if they weren't going to take care of it? Or what were they thinking planting those things there? Steve and I notice it all the time. We're constantly talking about what we see along the way. And Nancy says, yeah, things that need pruners. Considered always carrying her pruners around. Yep. Um, I admit that I have gone out in parking lots and shoveled soil away from trunks of trees. If I thought they were planted most recently enough that maybe I could save them and they were volcano mulched or planted too deep, I've got a trowel and a spade. And if nobody's looking at that, and most of the time people don't bother me because they figure, well, she's digging. I mean, somebody must have told her it was okay to dig. So I haven't been kicked out of it, but I just figure save the tree is worth it. Got an update on a story from last year. Oh my gosh, the deer ate the buds on the magnolia. Either you can wrap the whole tree if it's a small tree, Diane, or use a repellent spray on it. If you need to spray it now, this time of year when you've got enough warmth to let it stay and dry on the plant. And then it'll last until, maybe a January thaw and you want to reapply it. There are lots of different repellents, and it doesn't matter which one you use as long as you consider rotating them once in a while. Plant Skid, Ropel, Deer Away, Scat. They're all good things to use. I'm sorry, Kyle, I didn't want to know the magnolias are going to be susceptible or vulnerable too. Okay, an update. Nancy and David asked about their Amsonia last time we were together. I forgot to bring my water in. They said it looked beautiful like this, and then a week later it looked like that. And they didn't expect it to do that. And they felt that it was kind of cool looking. They're sorry that they didn't bring in more of it to use for arrangements. And I said, wow, we haven't seen that either. So we did write to a couple of people. You remember Pierre Bennerup, those of you who are part of our webinar group. Pierre has seen more plants in 90 some years than any of the rest of us have. And he said, oh yeah, they do that sometimes. And I thought, oh shoot. I also wrote to Richard Hawk at the Chicago Botanic Garden. I very much admire his plant evaluation program. I've told you before about their plant evaluation notes where they will grow. So in this case, Amsonia, They'll grow a number of different kinds of Amsonia, blue ice, ciliata, elliptica, Hubertii, illustris, and they will evaluate them over a 4-year, I think it's a 4-year period, might be a 5-year period, to notice when they bloom, what color they bloom, how big the flowers are, how much coverage there is in terms of flowers, how tall the plant is, whether there's any winter damage. And then they give them a rating. And you can find their plant evaluation notes if you go to Chicago Botanic Garden. Just search Chicago Botanic Garden plant evaluation, and it'll come up to the page where you can pick from coral bells and goat's beard and border jewel and all these plants, and they'll give you an idea of which ones might be the good ones to buy and that will grow well in the Midwest, which is the whole point. So I wrote to Richard Hawk. I haven't heard back yet, but I didn't want to hear that this was something everybody sees. But no sooner did I hear from Pierre that, yeah, that happens sometimes, that I was cataloging some pictures. And I looked at this picture from the Waterford Library of the Amsonia there. And I was looking at this part right there when I noticed that part right there. I said, oh, shoot. I guess we have been seeing it. We just never looked for it, and it never happened to the whole plant all at once. I can go back to the library now this week and look and see if something happened to the base of that stem, that particular one dried out quicker than the rest of them. But I expect if I hear back from Richard Hawk at all, he'll say, you haven't noticed that before? Where have you been looking? Okay. Lily wants to know about getting rid of Creeping Charlie that's covering the grass in the entire yard. You have my sympathies, Lily. The only way we've been able to get rid of Creeping Charlie is to kill off the whole area, and then after making sure that it's gone, replanting with a ground cover or lawn, whatever it is that's there, because it's growing by pieces that root along the ground. And you can rip it up, but if you break off even one of those pieces with a little root on it, it's going to come back again. If it's coming in from a neighbor's yard underneath the fence, it's going to get back in again. You have to take out what's there, restart the area, and protect it from wherever it's invading from. And that might mean leaving a bed along the area where the fence is, where it's coming in from a neighbor's place, and keeping that area full of something that doesn't look like Creeping Charlie and that can keep Creeping Charlie out, something dense and thick enough to shade it out. But it's not easy to do, and we've never successfully gotten rid of it completely out of a big lawn area. Right now, it's invading from my son's house, where there's no fence, there's no break except an imaginary line between their house and the neighbor's house. And the neighbor happens to really love his lawn. And I see him going along the edge and killing it as it's coming in, because that's the only way that he can do it. But there was a little bit of Creeping Charlie underneath a tree that Corey, our son, took down, and it exploded once he took the tree down. Boom, it was out and already out in the lawn. Sad things with these weeds. I see a hand up, and I'm sorry I forgot to look and see whose hand was up. But there's just one hand, so if you want to turn your microphone on and voice your...
Hi, Janet, it's Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
Thank you for the info on the Amsonia. It's pretty funny you seeing it at the Waterford Library. I guess we should start looking around more carefully. And thank you for what you found out so far. I did try emailing Clay and Limestone, but apparently that's not a valid email address. There were a couple of references to Instagram and Facebook, but I'm not savvy with either of those.
Neither am I.
Yeah.
And so many things are out there. So many ghost websites are still there. That's too bad. I should try to. Yeah.
But thank you for finding out what you did.
Oh, you're welcome. What do you think here? You can make tea out of Creeping Charlie. Who says that? Who's JN? Tell me what you know about Creeping Charlie tea. Turn on your microphone and tell us about Creeping Charlie tea. What's it got in it? High in vitamin C. Well, that's pretty cool. All right. It must be edible, because Creeping Charlie, which is also called gill over the ground or ale hoof, came from Europe. either on purpose or accidentally. It came from Europe. And it was used as a substitute for hops in brewing beer. So there must be something in it that's worthwhile. Oh, Diane in Waterville says she's been keeping her shovels in an oily sand-filled plastic plant container for 30 years, keeps them from rusting. So you actually keep them in there. You set them in there and leave them in there. That would definitely keep the oil around them. They stand on their own and they nest. Yeah, as far as keeping them sharp, I suppose so. Just by keeping them from rusting. Yep, that's a pretty good point. Because it is nice. I do that when I'm in the garden. If I've got a spade in my hand and I want to reach down and grab something, I just turn around and jam the spade into the ground and let it stand itself up. You do that in a sand bucket. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Oh, Jean says she says she doesn't she says about the creeping Charlie, you can make a tea out of it. She doesn't have a microphone. You can put it in a salad, cook it like spinach. Supposedly it has a slightly minty flavor. There's a lot of these things that you can graze through your garden. I should look and see if Margaret is here because Margaret grazes through gardens all the time. Because it was raining and I said, well, I'm going to stay in. I don't remember what we were talking about that brought us into worms, but it sidetracked me back into the books that we had on worms. And I learned so much about worms again, or relearned or learned new things. I forgot where we started, so I don't know what it was that someone brought up about worms, but if there is someone here who wanted to know about worms, this is the pamphlet. It's still available. It's a little booklet of, I don't know, 40 pages, 32 pages that you can still buy online, what every gardener should know about earthworms. And it's got a lot of things in it. But when I pulled mine out, I realized, oh my gosh, look what I've got in there. I had 2 articles that I copied and put in there, and I have copies of those articles, 2 of them, if anybody's interested in them, that were also extremely enlightening onto what worms can do. Now these were written, that one was from uh-oh. Becker, where'd you write? Natural Food and Farming. This is what he was, the magazine Natural Food and Farming. This was written before the nightcrawler became a big issue in northern areas where it's fishermen dumping their old nightcrawlers out have been changing the forest floor quite a bit. But this has to do with farms and using them there. And it has great stuff in it. A retail value of the 1 million earthworms that he thinks you should have in an acre would be $83,000 if you sold them as bait. Those kinds of things in there. And there's another article. Well, there's 2 articles. And 100 tons of earthworm castings were spread evenly on the soil surface. The field would be 2 2/3 inches higher every year. And that 100 tons of earthworms is like putting 100 tons of manure on the garden. It is actually a help. But there's lots of things that the worms do that improve soil. They make it into granules that allow more air and water to flow through. They make tunnels that air and water can flow through. They mix the soil from deep down up higher. And if you take a look at what they can do in the field, and there is a way that you can dig a square of a foot square, so 12 inches by 12 inches square out, and count the worms in it, and you can estimate then how many worms you have per acre. The author likes the idea of 1 million worms per acre, but in a continuously idle field, his numbers showed 813,000 worms per acre. And the erosion that happened was 30 tons when there's no worms, 5 tons if they're using it as a cropped tended field. They lose 5 tons of soil per year per acre, but they don't lose anything per year per acre when they've got full worms there. And that's something that we should think about. It just makes the water get in a lot quicker, and also has it running through worm casts, which are worm manure, which is fertilizer. Every percent of organic matter that you have in your soil, whether it's worm casts or broken down leaves, every percent of organic matter equals a pound per acre of nitrogen. So if I've got 4% nitrogen, 4% organic matter in my soil, that's about where we're running right now. That's a good rich soil. I can depend on my garden without any additional fertilizer to provide enough nitrogen at 4 pounds per acre per year. And that's enough for lettuce, tomatoes, enough for the the heavy eaters. So add those worms if you need to. They also talk about the different kinds of worms. There's at least 6 different kinds of worms. The night crawlers are not native, but the other ones are native. I remember eating our last tomatoes at middle of December when we let them bring them in green and let them ripen, or wrap them up in brown paper and then unwrap them later. We got a question from another Diane. We have a lot of Dianes. She says, "Why am I not smelling the fall leaves? The whole ground is covered with leaves, and I used to love the smell of the fall leaves." And it's true. Everybody knows that has read anything about fragrance, that our mind, our brain stores scent in a different part of the brain than it stores words and sounds and pictures. And that scents stimulate parts of the brain that go first to emotion and then to pictures and words and thoughts. So fall smell is an emotional kind of smell, and I like it too. So I got to looking, and I will put something more together, but I just actually just grabbed my notes, starting with the first thing that I found was from George Eliot, and my daughter Sonia's PhD work was on George Eliot and the use of a man's name as a author, as your pseudonym to write. While she was still Mary Ann Evans, before she adopted the name George Eliot, she wrote, "The smell of fall is a perfect anodyne to the restless spirit. Delicious autumn. My very soul was wedded to it, and if I were a bird, I could fly about the earth seeking the successive autumns." And I feel that way. Fall is a wonderful time. And the more that I got into it, the more that it makes a difference which plants are dropping leaves. The organic compounds that are released as they begin to break down. And that happens even on the tree. They begin to break down the compounds that are within. It's being exuded from the leaf. And in the fall, when you've got that situation of warm air holding things down, the inversions that happen in the fall, and have less moisture in the air and fewer things blooming and growing, you tend to notice the volatile organic compounds that linger. So we're noticing these kinds of things, and Steve and I have noticed many times the Katsura tree, even while the leaves are still on the tree and turning yellow, the whole place, to me, it smells like um, smells like cloves. This note that I found says kettle corn, burnt sugar. It's a compound called maltol that's in there, and that's from the Holden Arboretum. And then, of course, there's the things that are produced by conifers. All of those, we call it turpentine when we reduce conifer elements to an oil. But terpenes and terpenoids have anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, analgesic, and even anti-tumor properties, which is why people are encouraged in Japan to go forest bathing, to go walk in the woods and inhale all of those terpenes and turpentines. I like sassafras. Sassafras, if you've ever dug into its roots, they smell like root beer. And the rest of the plant, like, it's a different kind of smell. Call it fruity, but it's a wonderful thing. So whatever your leaves are, it's great, and they're going to be a slightly different smell. I remember smelling the sweet smell of maple leaves, and if you think about the fact that you can make maple syrup from almost any of the maple trees, and all that you're doing then is taking in liquid form the same chemical mix that's in the leaves themselves. Makes sense that as they break down, they smell sweet. So I like that. But I found mentions of other things: alder trees, blackberries, figs, and that those smell good. I said, well, I'm going to have to find an alder tree or find somebody else who tells me what these smell like. I found a note that the sycamore leaf smells, well, maybe like sweet tea. Something on Reddit said sweet tea, but in another article, it said that men are more likely to be able to smell sycamore than women. And I think, well, now that's an interesting thing too. And does a fig tree inside smell like cat pee, or did somebody write that down because they have a cat that likes to use the big pot underneath their big fig tree? Because I never noticed that. Liriodendron is tulip tree. And I have noticed the roots smell it's a wonderful, warm, spicy smell. I have not noticed the pawpaw leaves smell like diesel fuel as they break down. I have heard before that black cherry smells like almond, and it smells like almond because it's making cyanide compounds. Black cherry is an awful thing to have if you have any livestock, if you've got sheep or cows or horses, you don't want to have black cherry leaves in your field that they can eat by accident. Anyway, that's the kind of thing I've been doing this week. And it does tend to sidetrack me so that I end up with not enough time to get pictures to show you these particular plants that I'm talking about. So I'll do that another time. Marilyn's been looking for the Chicago Botanic Garden website and haven't found the evaluation page you referenced. I never find it by going to Chicago Botanic Garden site. I'm not sure that they hide it, but it's not an easy thing to find. It's something in science and experimentation, or there's a tab. I think science is in that tab. I just put into my search field Chicago Botanic Garden evaluation notes, and it takes me to one of the pages, which then I can back up into the index for the whole page. I hope that makes sense. I'll put out with our with the recording, I'll put out the site specific address, but I won't go looking for it right now because I never get to it that way. Oh, Karen's been pressing leaves from different trees and is going to put them on her Thanksgiving table instead of a place card sometimes. That's a really cool idea. When my parents first retired and moved down to Arizona, I started in the fall collecting a box of leaves for them of all different plants and sending them down to remind them what fall was like. I should have asked them how that smells. Some of the references that I looked at, I have to follow too, because I wonder, it said that spruce and fir smell the same. And I don't think they smell the same at all. I think that blue spruce and white fir smell quite different. Uh-oh, it's time to go. And I did get to the main problem with the roots. Sue, are you there? If you're there, Sue, stay, because I'll cover this before I go. I am sorry. No, Sue's not there, so I'll save this for next time. We've been working on this tree, this Coosa dogwood, which is in trouble, and I'll bring that up the next time. Thanks a lot for being here, everybody. Heaven's sakes, how time goes by. Let's see, how do I get back there? Go. So forgive me for keeping you beyond 8 o'clock. Didn't mean to do that. Everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll be back for a webinar on December 7th and for a webinar on January 4th, but we will not be back for Free4All Friday. That's it for this one. We'll be back until January 7th will be the next Free4All Friday. So we're taking a holiday break and expecting that you'll come back with tool cleaning questions and interior plant questions and plant ordering questions and all those cool things that keep us going through the wintertime. We do have an indoor garden sessions coming up and the traveling gardener. And for both of those, we're going to offer anybody who would like to try to just come in and try it out. Just send us an email. We'll send you an invitation to just that one, and you can see what it's all about and decide whether you want to become a subscriber for the long run. And that is it. Thank you, everybody.